Position make you rich? I don't have that type of richness. My richness is life, forever.
They said it was cancer, but the truth behind Bob Marley's death still raises eyebrows. Was it just melanoma or something way darker? In this video, we're breaking down the facts, the rumors, and the shocking theories about how the reggae legend really died. Buckle up, it gets wild. Early life and career. Before he was the face on every college student's dorm wall and the sound floating through beach bars around the world, Bob Marley was just a barefoot kid in rural Jamaica with a complicated family tree and a knack for making noise in the best way possible. Bob Marley entered the world on February 6, 1945, in a small village called 9 Mile, tucked deep in St. Ann Parish, Jamaica. His mother, Cedella Malcolm, was only 18. His father, Norval Marley, was a white man in his 60s who called himself Captain, even though his military career maxed out at private. Let's just say Norval had more titles than time with his son. He was mostly absent from Bob's life and passed away when Bob was just 10 years old. Now, here's where it gets a little murky. Some relatives claim the Marley name had Syrian Jewish roots, but most researchers and even Marley's own biographer gave that theory the side eye. Either way, what's clear is that Bob came from a world where identity wasn't simple, and that complexity shaped his music and message. His birth name? Nesta Robert Marley. But rumor has it, a Jamaican official decided Nesta sounded too much like a girl's name and flipped it to Robert Nesta Marley when processing his documents. Bureaucracy at its finest. Music came early. Bob's grandfather, Omariah, practiced mayal. This is a spiritual and musical tradition in Jamaica, which sparked Marley's early interest in sound and rhythm. In school, Bob linked up with his soon-to-be bandmate Bunny Wailer. Their bond grew even stronger when their parents got together and had a child, making Bob and Bunny unofficial stepbrothers. When Bob was 12, he and his mom moved to Kingston's Trenchtown neighborhood. If 9 Mile was peaceful countryside, Trenchtown was loud, crowded, and buzzing with energy. It's where Bob's sound matured and his world widened. He and Bunny soaked up American R&B and ska blaring from distant radio towers. Soon enough, they formed a group with Peter Tosh, calling themselves everything from the Teenagers to the Wailing Rude Boys to the Wailing Wailers, before finally settling on the Wailers. Joe Higgs, a neighbor and experienced vocalist, took the boys under his wing and gave them the boot camp treatment, tightening their harmonies and teaching Bob guitar. This is when things started cooking. By the early 60s, Bob had recorded his first songs at Federal Studios. Judge Not and One Cup of Coffee were early stabs at carving out his voice in a crowded scene. Fun fact, one of the tracks was released under the name Bobby Martell. That's right, even Bob Marley had an alias phase. By 1963, the Wailers had their first big hit with Simmer Down, a track that flew off Jamaican shelves. But like every classic band story, lineup changes hit hard. By 1906, only the Holy Trinity remained: Bob, Bunny, and Tosh. That same year, Bob married Rita Anderson and took a detour to the US, working jobs in Delaware and New Jersey, including a stint at Chrysler under the name Donald Marley. That's right. He went from reggae king to forklift guy and back again. Spiritually, Bob was raised Catholic, but once he left his mother's roof, he was drawn to the Rastafari movement. When he came back to Jamaica, the dreadlocks came with him. This wasn't a fashion choice, it was a full identity shift. Later, Bob and the Wailers worked with legendary producer Lee "Scratch" Perry, a partnership that many fans still argue brought out their best work. The sessions led to songs that ditched the horns and ska sound in favor of electric guitar, and that slow, heavy rhythm we now call reggae. And just before their big break, Bob spent time in London, living at 34 Ridgemount Gardens, and hustling to get noticed in the global music scene. He jammed with songwriters in the Bronx and even played around with doo-wop and 60s love ballads, showing he was always evolving. Island Records and beyond. You know a guy's committed to his music when he gets shot 2 days before a concert and still shows up to perform. That's Bob Marley. But before the bullets and the global fame, Marley had to hustle his way into the international spotlight, one smoky studio and one risky record deal at a time. It all kicked off in 1972 when Bob Marley signed with CBS Records and hit the UK tour circuit with soul singer Johnny Nash. While in London, Bob and the Wailers saw an opportunity and made a bold move. They asked their road manager to connect them with Chris Blackwell, the man behind Island Records. They planned to talk about royalty money they felt was missing. Instead, they walked out with a recording deal and a cash advance of around $4,000. That was a solid chunk of change in the 70s, and a massive leap for a reggae group at the time. Blackwell had just lost his top reggae star, Jimmy Cliff, and was looking for someone who had that rebel rock edge. When Bob walked into his office with his natural charisma and quiet fire, Blackwell knew he'd found his guy. And Blackwell? He wanted reggae that could hit with rock fans. The timing was perfect. Back in Jamaica, the Wailers got to work at Harry J's studio in Kingston, recording what would become Catch a Fire. For the first time, a reggae band had access to real studio treatment, 8 tracks, decent gear, the whole deal. When Bob returned to London, Blackwell reshaped the sound, adding overdubs and tweaking the mix to soften the heavy bass that was standard in Jamaican music. 2 tracks were cut, and what was left became a slick, hypnotic record that could sit on a shelf next to Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones. The album dropped in April 1973, dressed up in a Zippo lighter-style cover. It only sold about 14,000 copies at first, but critics were into it. The real spark came later that year with their next album, Burnin', featuring the now legendary track, I Shot the Sheriff. Enter Eric Clapton. Clapton got his hands on Burnin', loved what he heard, and decided to cover I Shot the Sheriff. That move changed everything. Clapton's version hit #1 on the Billboard charts, and suddenly Bob Marley was being heard in living rooms far beyond Jamaica. Even though some Jamaicans weren't feeling the slicker sound of Catch a Fire, the rawness of Burnin' won them back, and drew in even more fans from the rock scene. As Marley's fame grew, Blackwell handed over his house at 56 Hope Road in Kingston. This wasn't just some swanky home. It became the headquarters for Tuff Gong Studios and Bob's own personal base. Talk about leveling up. By 1974, the original Wailers, Bob, Bunny Wailer, and Peter Tosh, split up to pursue solo careers. But Bob wasn't about to slow down. He formed a new band under the name Bob Marley and the Wailers. This group had serious talent, including the Barrett brothers on rhythm, Junior Marvin and Al Anderson on guitar, and the legendary I3s on backing vocals, featuring Bob's wife Rita. In 1975, Marley had a breakout hit with a live version of No Woman, No Cry. It was real, raw, and heartfelt, exactly what people needed. His next album, Rastaman Vibration, cracked the Billboard Soul charts in the US, sealing his place as a global icon. But fame came with danger. Just 2 days before the Smile Jamaica concert in December 1976, gunmen stormed Marley's home. Bob, Rita, and his manager were all injured. Rumors flew that the hit was politically motivated. Despite getting shot in the chest and arm, Bob took the stage, bandaged and bruised, and performed for 80,000 people. Why? As he put it, the people who are trying to make this world worse aren't taking a day off. How can I? Moving to England in the later years. Most folks go to London for tea, sightseeing, or maybe to snap a photo next to Big Ben. Bob Marley? He went into self-imposed exile, dropped 2 iconic albums, got arrested for weed, and still found time to rewrite music history. Not your average vacation. After surviving an assassination attempt in late 1976, Marley decided it was time to step away from the heat, literally and politically. He first took a breather in the Bahamas, hanging around Chris Blackwell's Compass Point Studios, doing some healing and writing. Then he landed in England, where he'd spend the next 2 years turning pain into powerful music. London lit a fire under Marley. Between 1970 and 1978, he recorded 2 of his most celebrated albums, Exodus and Kaya. Marley had left Jamaica, but he hadn't left the struggle. The album spent a jaw-dropping 56 straight weeks on the UK charts and gave us hits like Jamming, One Love, and Waiting in Vain. The man was in exile, but the world was finally listening. Now, Marley wasn't all politics and poetry. He knew how to have fun with it too. The music video for Is This Love from Kaya was filmed at the Keskiti Centre in London, a black-led theatre and arts hub. One of the kids featured, a young Naomi Campbell. Yep, that Naomi Campbell. She made her on-screen debut dancing to Marley's sweet, laid-back rhythms. And because No Reggae Legends UK chapter would be complete without a run-in with the law, Marley did get busted for having a small amount of cannabis while in London. No shock there. It was Bob Marley after all, but it didn't slow him down one bit. In June 1907, Marley and the Wailers tore the roof off the Rainbow Theatre in London during 4 back-to-back nights of performances. The BBC later turned this into the documentary Live at the Rainbow, giving fans a taste of what it was like to witness Marley in his element, raw, electrifying, and unstoppable. By 1978, Marley was ready to head home. He returned to Jamaica not just as a musician, but as a peacemaker. At the One Love Peace concert, he did something most politicians only dream of. He got the 2 leaders of Jamaica's bitterly divided political parties to come on stage and shake hands. The image was unforgettable. The message? Music has power. Marley kept up the momentum. That same year, he released Babylon by Bus, a double live album that captured the explosive energy of his performances. The track Jamming stood out, not just for the beat, but for the audience's wild response. You couldn't listen to it without feeling like you were right there in the crowd, sweating, swaying, and singing along. Then came Survival in 1979. This was an album packed with political heat and Pan-African pride. Songs like Africa Unite and Zimbabwe were rallying cries. Marley stood firmly with the oppressed, and his music made it clear. In 1980, he played in Zimbabwe at the nation's official independence celebration. It was a full-circle moment for a man who had spent years preaching unity and revolution through song. That same year, he released Uprising, a deeply spiritual record that gave us Forever Loving Jah and the hauntingly beautiful Redemption Song. Bob Marley passed away in 1981, but his voice didn't. Confrontation, released in 1983, was a posthumous collection of unreleased tracks, including Buffalo Soldier. Even after death, Marley's music kept speaking for the voiceless, challenging injustice, and calling for change. Philosophy and Rastafarianism. They say music can move mountains, but Bob Marley was trying to move something even bigger: human consciousness. Known around the world as the face of reggae and the voice of the oppressed, Marley was far more than a musician. He was a mystic, a rebel, and eventually, a man caught between 2 spiritual homes. Long before he became an icon draped in red, gold, and green, Bob Marley was born into a Catholic family. But everything changed in the mid-1960s when he discovered the Rastafari movement. This is a spiritual path that would not only shape his music, but also define his life. Rastafari wasn't just a religion to Marley, it was liberation, identity, and resistance wrapped into one powerful worldview. Through its lens, Marley saw Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia not as a political figure, but as a divine incarnation, Jah incarnate on earth. This belief system seeped into his music like smoke through a keyhole. Marley urged African descendants around the world to reconnect with their roots, to resist the spiritual and material Babylon of Western oppression, and to embrace a deeper truth about who they were. A cornerstone of Marley's Rastafari practice was the ritual use of cannabis, or the herb, as he called it. But for Marley, this wasn't recreational rebellion. It was a sacred meditation. In interviews, he described marijuana as a mirror, a plant that revealed the soul. Herb, he said, makes you meditate. It shows you yourself. To him, ganja was wisdom in leafy form, opening the heart, quieting the ego, and tuning him into Jah's frequency. Despite run-ins with the law, Marley remained vocal and unapologetic. He didn't just use the herb, he defended it, lived it, and wove it into the spiritual DNA of his music. To Marley, laws against marijuana weren't just legal issues. They were spiritual crimes against nature and truth. But Marley's spiritual story didn't end there. In a quiet but monumental turn shortly before he died in 1980, he embraced a new path. He was baptized into the Ethiopian Orthodox Church by Archbishop Abuna Yesahak, taking the new name Berhane Selassie, meaning Light of the Trinity. Marley didn't abandon Jah. He broadened his vision of the divine. In truth, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had long been held in high regard by many Rastas. To be baptized into it was, in many ways, a full-circle moment, a merging of cultural pride, ancient faith, and personal transformation. Even in this shift, Marley remained unapologetically Marley. He didn't stop fighting for Africa's liberation, didn't mute his message, and didn't disconnect from the people who saw him as a prophet. In fact, his final album, Uprising, was his most spiritually intense work, featuring songs like Redemption Song, which echoed Marcus Garvey's legacy and sounded like a farewell sermon from a revolutionary saint. Marley's embrace of Ethiopian orthodoxy added a new layer to his already complex identity. It was a final act of spiritual commitment, showing that even icons seek deeper truths. As death loomed, Marley didn't just cling to what he knew, he reached for something more eternal: family and other loves. You think you know Bob Marley? Think again. Beyond the dreadlocks, the soulful anthems, and the global stardom was a man juggling a complicated family tree, a deep love for football, and a cheeky taste for speed, preferably with his initials on the hood. While the world may see him as the face of reggae, Marley was also a father of many, very many. Officially, the Bob Marley website acknowledges 11 children, born between 1964 and 1978. But dig deeper, and the story twists into something more layered, more intimate, and, dare we say, more Marley. His relationship with Rita Anderson, whom he married on February 10, 1906 in Kingston, was the starting point. Rita brought her daughter Sharon into the marriage, whom Bob adopted as his own. Together they went on to have 3 more children: Sadella, Ziggy, yes, that's Ziggy, and Stephen. These names would later go on to carry the Marley torch, musically and culturally, across the globe. Over the years, he fathered children with multiple women, and he didn't shy away from acknowledging or embracing them. Notably, he adopted Stephanie, Rita's daughter, with footballer Owen Ital Taki Stewart, fully entitling her to his estate. He also fathered children with Pat Williams, Janet Hunt, Janet Bowen, Lucy Pounder, Anita Bell Navis, and Cindy Breakspear, the last of whom was Miss World 1976 and the mother of Damian Marley, arguably one of Bob's most musically potent successors. Then there are the lesser-known claims. Makeda Marley, born after Bob's death to Yvette Anderson, now Yvette Crichton, and Imani Carroll, reportedly born to Cheryl Murray in 1963. While they appear in some biographies and online sources, they remain absent from the official Marley family registry. It's a reminder that even in death, Marley's legacy dances somewhere between fact and myth. And what of the next generation? Marley's grandchildren are carving their own paths, each in their own right. Skip Marley and YG Marley have stepped into the musical arena, reviving their grandfather's rhythms with a modern twist. Selah Marley, daughter of Lauryn Hill, and Rohan Marley, has graced fashion runways. Donisha Prendergast, granddaughter through Sharon, has used film to explore identity, spirituality, and social change. Even American football player Nico Marley made headlines as a linebacker, proving the Marley DNA isn't limited to one creative channel. But Marley's passions weren't confined to people or music. Football was his other great love. He wasn't just a fan, he was a fanatic. Whether in parking lots, open fields, or studio break rooms, he could be found chasing a ball. His heart beat in time with the rhythm of a pass, a goal, a good match. He idolized Brazil's Pelé and Argentina's Ossie Ardiles, and even counted Jamaican international Alan "Skill" Cole among his closest friends. So close, Cole became his tour manager in the 1970s. Marley once told a journalist, "If you want to get to know me, you have to play football against me and the Whalers." That's not just a quote, it's a lifestyle. And finally, let's talk cars. Marley didn't drive just anything. He cruised around in BMs, a 1602 and a later E3 2500. Not because of the engineering, necessarily. No, Bob joked that BMW stood for Bob Marley and the Whalers. You can't make that up. And honestly, why would you? Melanoma diagnoses. When Bob Marley sang about Redemption Song, few realized he was fighting for his own life. In July 1907, the reggae icon received a diagnosis that would alter the course of his life forever. Acral lentiginous melanoma, a rare and aggressive form of skin cancer that typically strikes areas of the body hidden from the sun, like the soles of feet or beneath toenails. This was no battle scar from a football game, despite rumors. The dark spot beneath the nail on his right big toe was not a result of a sports injury. It was a red flag from his own body, one that had gone unnoticed for far too long. After seeing multiple doctors, it took a biopsy to confirm the diagnosis. Even then, the condition was poorly understood. At the time, acral lentiginous melanoma wasn't even listed in the top medical textbooks, despite being the most common type of skin cancer found in individuals with darker skin tones. Doctors urged Marley to amputate the toe to halt the spread of the disease. Deeply rooted in his Rastafari beliefs, Marley refused amputation, choosing instead to remove the nail and nail bed and cover the area with a skin graft from his thigh. To many, it seemed like a small compromise in exchange for his life. But for Marley, his body was sacred, and altering it in such a way felt like violating his faith and identity. What followed was a period of relentless determination. Despite his diagnosis, Marley pushed forward with plans for a massive world tour. His final studio album, Uprising, was released in May 1980, and it would become a powerful farewell. The European leg of the Uprising tour was a triumphant run, capped off by an electric performance in front of 100,000 fans at Milan's San Siro Stadium, his largest crowd ever. He then took the stage in Dublin for what would be his last open-air concert, and soon after, he was lighting up Madison Square Garden in New York City. It was clear that Marley wasn't slowing down, even as his body was quietly being overtaken by the cancer that had spread to his brain, lungs, and liver. Then came September 21st, 1980. While out jogging in Central Park, Marley collapsed. The incident forced an emergency hospital visit, revealing just how far the disease had progressed. Undeterred, Marley gave one final performance 2 days later at the Stanley Theater in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Those who were there describe it as a bittersweet, soul-stirring show, a final gift to the world. No official footage exists of that night, but haunting stills taken during the concert were later used in Kevin MacDonald's acclaimed documentary, Marley. These images offer a glimpse into the strength of a man whose body was failing, but whose spirit refused to yield. Following the Pittsburgh show, Marley's health rapidly declined. He canceled the remaining tour dates and sought unconventional treatment at Dr. Joseph Issel's clinic in Bavaria, Germany. The Issel's therapy combined strict dietary controls, detox regimens, and immune-boosting protocols. It was a last-ditch effort to reclaim his health without resorting to more invasive medical treatments that conflicted with his beliefs. Final days. It wasn't the roar of a crowd or the pulse of a bass line that marked Bob Marley's final act. It was the quiet breath of a legend slipping away far from the spotlight. After months of fighting for his life in the serene mountains of Germany, Bob Marley's health took a devastating turn. He had pinned his hopes on alternative therapies at a private clinic nestled in Bavaria, far from the hospitals and headlines. But after 8 long months, it became clear the treatments weren't working. Cancer had taken hold of his body, and the disease was no longer playing defense. Marley made the heartbreaking decision to fly home to Jamaica. One last journey back to his roots. He never made it. During the flight, his condition worsened rapidly. The plane was forced to land in Miami, where he was rushed to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. Just hours later, on May 11, 1981, Bob Marley passed away. He was only 36 years old. The cancer had spread mercilessly through his brain and lungs, ending the life of a man whose music had carried messages of peace and justice across every continent. But Marley's final message was a whisper to his son Ziggy. On your way up, take me up. On your way down, don't let me down. A father, a prophet, a revolutionary, Marley left this world with one last request for love, loyalty, and legacy. Jamaica responded in a way only fitting for a national hero. On May 21, 1981, the country held a state funeral for the music icon, blending the traditions of Ethiopian orthodoxy with the deep spirituality of Rastafari. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a celebration of everything he had stood for. Marley was laid to rest in a mausoleum in 9 Mile, the small village where his story began. Inside his coffin were 3 personal treasures: his beloved red Gibson Les Paul guitar, a Bible open to Psalm 23, and a single stalk of cannabis placed by his wife, Rita. Each item was symbolic, a nod to his art, his faith, and his culture. Jamaican Prime Minister Edward Seaga delivered a eulogy that echoed across the island and around the world. He described Marley not just as a person, but as an experience. His voice was an omnipresent cry in our electronic world, Seaga said. Bob Marley was never seen. He was an experience which left an indelible imprint with each encounter. And he wasn't wrong. Marley's death was more than a loss. It was a global reckoning. His songs had become anthems, and his voice, once full of defiance and soul, was suddenly gone. Yet somehow, he felt even more alive in the days that followed. Just 3 years after his death, in 1984, the compilation album Legend was released. It would go on to become the best-selling reggae album of all time. Tracks like Buffalo Soldier and Could You Be Loved reached new generations, turning Marley into more than a man. He became a symbol of resistance, of unity, of refusing to compromise, even when the odds are stacked against you. Even now, decades later, Bob Marley's music lives on in protests, in celebrations, in headphones, and heartbeats. His image is etched into the consciousness of fans across the globe. The mark he left. Bob Marley didn't just leave behind an unforgettable sound. He left a legacy that refuses to fade. Decades after his passing, his influence stretches from classrooms to Congress halls, from grassroots rallies to Grammy-winning stages. The man who once sang about redemption became a global symbol for it. Across the world, leaders, artists, and everyday people continue to reference Marley's message in ways that go far beyond playlists. His lyrics are quoted in speeches. His songs are reimagined by musicians across genres. His life story is included in school curriculums. His legacy, bigger than reggae, he's become the voice of justice, the poster child for resistance with rhythm. In Jamaica, Bob Marley is much more than a national icon. He's cultural royalty. His birthday, February 6th, is now observed as Bob Marley Day, not just on the island, but by reggae fans, freedom fighters, and music lovers across the planet. His former home in Kingston, now the Bob Marley Museum, stands as a living tribute to the man whose music set hearts on fire and stirred minds to action. It's a destination for pilgrims of peace, soul seekers, and die-hard fans who want to feel close to the pulse of something real. But Marley's power went beyond catchy bass lines and a revolutionary hairstyle. He knew how to use his platform. Through what became known as the peace concerts in the late 1970s, Marley tried to heal political wounds in Jamaica, even as violence shook the nation. He famously brought rival political leaders on stage, held their hands in unity, and showed the world what leadership through love looked like. He wasn't just calling for peace, he was building it. And the ripple effects still felt today. Marley's songs are soundtracks for social movements. Whether it's a march for civil rights or a protest for environmental justice, his voice booms through speakers like a rallying cry. Bob Marley's deep belief in the Rastafarian faith was a spiritual statement, a form of rebellion against colonial systems, inequality, and cultural erasure. He didn't just sing about freedom, he lived it, from his dreadlocks to his devotion. As a spiritual leader, Marley introduced millions to a new way of seeing the world, one rooted in respect for life, unity, and a deep connection to the divine. In an age where the planet itself seems to be crying out, Marley's environmental messages hit harder than ever. His call to protect Mother Earth and live in harmony with nature now reads less like a song lyric and more like a prophecy. For today's climate warriors, he's an unexpected but powerful patron saint. Bob Marley managed to turn music into medicine for the soul and a weapon against oppression. And while he's no longer with us in body, his spirit has gone viral in the most sacred sense. Every generation finds new meaning in his work, whether they're fighting for LGBTQ rights, decolonization, clean water, or inner peace. So, when people say Bob Marley died, they're not quite right. His body may have passed, but his voice, it's immortal. Still blazing like a torch, still whispering to the oppressed, still urging us to get up, stand up, not just for reggae, not just for Jamaica, but for justice. The mystery of Bob Marley's death isn't just medical, it's mythical. Was it fate or something far more sinister? One thing's clear, his voice lives on louder than ever. If this deep dive shook your view, hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below, because legends never truly leave us.